I always thought my family had my back. For years, I did everything to help them, from covering their bills to picking up the pieces whenever things fell apart. But when it came to me, there was always a disconnect. I worked hard, struggled to make ends meet, and never asked for anything in return. But one day, everything changed. I was sitting in my grandpa's study, expecting another casual chat like always, when he casually dropped the bombshell. "How do you spend your $4,400,000 trust fund?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. I froze. My mind went blank. "What trust fund?" I stammered. I had no idea what he was talking about. How could I not know? My grandpa had set up a trust fund for me when I was born, and I'd been living without even knowing about it. The question hit me like a slap to the face. How had I been kept in the dark for so long? What would you do if you were me? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned to see what happens next. I sat there, trying to process everything my grandpa had just said, but the shock was overwhelming. My mind raced as I stared at the piece of paper he had given me. $4,400,000. How had I not known? All these years struggling through hard jobs, facing financial stress, and all the while, a fortune had been sitting there waiting for me. I felt a rush of emotions: confusion, anger, disbelief. Grandpa spoke casually about it, like it was no big deal, as if this was just something I should accept. He explained that he had set it up when I was born as a way to help me when I was ready, but it was clear that I wasn't ready to hear it. How could he have kept this from me for so long? My mind replayed all those moments when I had struggled, and never once had anyone offered me this kind of support. Why hadn't he told me earlier? Why let me fight through all that when I could have had this help all along? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My family had always treated me like I should be grateful for what little they gave me. But here was a massive sum I never knew existed, and no one had thought to mention it. I had been living my life thinking I was on my own, thinking I had to work harder just to get by, while they all knew the truth. Grandpa smiled, completely unaware of the storm of emotions brewing inside me. He said it was meant to help me, to give me a head start. But I didn't need a head start. I needed honesty, transparency. I needed to have been told about this from the beginning. My grandpa's words about being ready kept echoing in my mind, but it didn't make sense. Ready? I was ready a long time ago. I had been fighting for years, working multiple jobs, making sacrifices for a future that felt uncertain, while this money was waiting for me. It wasn't about being ready anymore. It was about feeling completely betrayed by the family I had tried so hard to please. I thought back to all the times I had asked for help, to all the times I had quietly supported my family and worked through my own struggles, only to be met with indifference or judgment. They never considered how much I was struggling. And now, with this sudden revelation, I felt as if my entire existence had been overshadowed by their secrecy. I wasn't just angry. I was hurt. All those years of hard work, of doing everything right, while this massive trust fund sat there, untouched, like I was being punished for something. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, waiting for me to speak, but I couldn't find the words. His casual demeanor only made it worse. How could he sit there so calmly, knowing what he'd kept from me all these years? Was this how they all viewed me, as someone who needed to earn their trust fund, as if I hadn't already earned it 100 times over? It wasn't just about the money. The money was just a symbol of everything that had been wrong with my life. It represented how my family had treated me, as if I didn't deserve their help, as if I had to prove my worth at every turn. And now, with one simple statement, my grandpa had opened my eyes to the truth. I had been kept in the dark for so long because they didn't trust me enough to give me what was mine. I felt betrayed, and the anger kept building. Grandpa didn't see it. He thought I was just processing, but I was stewing. I couldn't let this go. Not after everything. I stood up and walked toward the window, trying to calm myself. I had to make a decision. It was clear now that I could never go back to the way things were. I had always lived under the shadow of their expectations, but I wasn't going to do that anymore. I wasn't just going to accept this money as a gift. I was going to take control of it. On my terms, I turned back to my grandpa, who was watching me with a quiet understanding, and I knew I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to just take the money and let everything go back to the way it was. I had been struggling for too long, and now it was time to make them see me as more than just the person they could use when it suited them. I wasn't going to allow this trust fund to be just a tool for them to keep me in line. I was going to take the money, yes, but I was going to do it my way, and I was going to use it to change my life, to finally have the control I had always wanted. I didn't need their permission, and I didn't need their approval. I needed to do this for me, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. I wasn't just going to be grateful for the handout. I was going to prove that I was worthy of this money by taking charge of my life. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to waste it. So, what would you do in my shoes? Would you take the money and let everything go back to how it was? Or would you use it to create the life you've always dreamed of? Let me know in the comments below, and stay tuned to see how this story unfolds. The more I thought about it, the more determined I became. My whole life, I had followed the rules, lived under the expectations of my family, and struggled to get by. Now, with the trust fund sitting in front of me, I felt a surge of frustration and clarity. This wasn't just about money, it was about taking control of my own future. I'd spent years trying to prove myself to everyone, especially my family, but I had been kept in the dark about something that should have been mine all along. The anger I felt wasn't just about not knowing about the trust fund, it was about the way I had been treated. I'd worked hard and made sacrifices, always thinking I was doing the right thing, only to realize that my family had quietly set me up for success without telling me. It was time for a change. I wasn't going to sit back and accept this gift without making my own decisions. I didn't need their permission, and I sure as hell didn't need their approval. This was about me and the life I wanted to create. I couldn't keep letting them decide my worth, let alone my financial future. I wasn't just going to take the money and walk away. I was going to use it to secure my independence, to build something that was truly mine, not just given to me because of who I was. This wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming my power. I spent the next few days making plans. I wasn't going to waste this opportunity. It wasn't just about buying a luxury car or moving into a big house. No, I wanted something more. I wanted to invest, to start a business, to make this money work for me, not just sit in a bank account. The trust fund could be the foundation for the life I had always dreamed of. I started doing research, reaching out to financial experts, exploring ways to grow this money, real estate, stocks, entrepreneurship. I wanted to build something that would last, something that would give me the financial freedom to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. But more than that, I wanted to show my family that I could succeed without relying on them, without their approval. I thought about how they would react once they saw the changes I was making. Would they try to control me again? Would they feel threatened by my independence? I didn't care anymore. I had spent too many years trying to please them, trying to be the person they wanted me to be. It was time to make decisions on my terms. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving that I was capable of far more than they ever gave me credit for. I wasn't the one they could push aside anymore. This trust fund wasn't just a way out. It was my ticket to freedom, to living my life without worrying about their judgments. I felt a rush of excitement as I imagined what I could do with it. The freedom to travel, to start a business, to invest in things I believed in. It was all possible now. And that wasn't just about financial freedom, it was about creating a future on my own terms. I was done playing the role of the family's backup plan. I was done being overlooked. This was my moment to step into the life I deserved. I was no longer the person they could ignore. It wasn't going to be easy, though. I knew the family might react. I knew they might feel entitled to some of this money. They'd probably expect me to share it, to help them out the way I always had. But I wasn't going to let that happen. This time, I was going to be the one who decided who got my help and when. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. This wasn't about getting revenge in the way most people think. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about showing them that I had my own path to walk. It was about showing them that I could stand on my own, that I could succeed without their support, their validation, or their control. It was about building something for myself, not just inheriting something they thought was theirs to give. I took a deep breath, finally feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't going to sit back and let the money define me. I was going to define it. This trust fund wasn't just a gift, it was a tool for me to craft the life I wanted. I wasn't just going to accept their handouts, I was going to use them to propel myself forward, to create something bigger than they could ever imagine. I was ready to stop living for them and start living for me, and that, in itself, was the most powerful decision I could make. What would you do with a trust fund like this? Would you use it to live the life you've always dreamed of? Or would you continue to live by other people's rules? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned to see how this story unfolds. The next morning, I woke up with clarity I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just going to take the trust fund and disappear into comfort. This was my chance to show everyone, especially my family, that I was in control of my own future. I was done being the one who was always expected to help, to pick up the pieces, to be the backup plan. I was going to build something for myself. On my own terms, the thought of using the money just for luxury or a carefree life didn't sit well with me. I wanted more. I wanted power, freedom, and to make a statement that I could do this without anyone's help. No more waiting for approval. It was time for me to take my place. I called a financial advisor the moment I could. This trust fund was an opportunity. Yes, but it was also a responsibility. I wasn't going to just sit on it and let it grow stagnant in a bank account. I started researching everything I could: real estate, stocks, investments, even looking into starting my own business. I wanted to make this money work for me, to build something that would last far longer than a few purchases. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore, I was aiming to thrive, to take full control of my destiny. And as I made plans, I realized that wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself and to my family that I could make it on my own, that I didn't need them to decide what my future looked like. The family gathering came around sooner than I expected, and I knew it was time to make a statement. I wasn't going to be the one they called when they needed something anymore. I wasn't the person they could rely on to fix everything. I wasn't going to play that role. When I walked into that room, I knew they had no idea what was coming. I casually mentioned my new investments, the business I was planning to launch, and watched their faces shift from amusement to shock. They were caught off guard, and that was exactly how I wanted it. They'd always treated me like I was the one to fall back on, the one who'd help when things went wrong. But now, I was the one they had to reckon with. I saw them exchange glances, unsure of how to react. For once, the power was in my hands. I didn't need to offer financial help or bail them out anymore. They were left trying to figure out where they fit into my life now that I was no longer the person they could take advantage of. The silence in the room was telling. It wasn't uncomfortable for me. It was satisfying. They had expected me to stay small, to stay in the background. But now I was front and center, making decisions for myself. No more being the quiet one, the one who stayed out of the limelight. The more I spoke about my plans, the more I realized how much power I had gained. It wasn't about showing off, it was about making them understand that I was done being overlooked. I had spent so much of my life trying to fit into their expectations, but now I was building something for myself, and watching them realize that they no longer held any influence over me felt better than I could have imagined. The best part wasn't even the shock in their eyes. It was the realization that I didn't need them. I wasn't bound by their opinions or their expectations anymore. The evening dragged on, but I wasn't paying much attention to the small talk or the usual family drama. I was focused on my future, on what I was building. It felt liberating to no longer be the one who was relied on for everything. I was taking charge of my own life now, making decisions based on what I wanted, not what they thought I should do. I had a trust fund, yes, but it wasn't just the money that had changed everything. It was the control I now had over my life. By the time the gathering ended, I knew I had made my point. They could sit there, uncomfortable and unsure of how to handle me now. I wasn't going to be their fallback plan, their safety net. I wasn't going to be the one who bailed them out when things went wrong. This was my moment to prove that I didn't need anyone to define my success. And for once, I felt like I was truly free. Grandpa had seen me make these decisions, and even though he never said much, I could tell he was proud of the person I had become. He had always believed in me, but now I had finally proven it to myself. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my life and my future. The money was just a tool to make that happen. But the real victory was in taking control, setting boundaries, and no longer allowing my family to dictate how I should live. I had always been the one who helped them, always the one who gave. But now it was time to turn that around. And it felt incredible. I wasn't the person they could control anymore. So, what would you do if you found yourself with a trust fund? A new chance to build your own? Would you use it to create the life you've always wanted, or let it be something to hide behind? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned to see where this journey takes me next. After the family gathering, everything felt different. It wasn't just that I had made my point. It was that I finally understood the weight of the decision I had made. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of true freedom. Freedom from the expectations of my family, freedom from their judgment, and freedom to make my own decisions without needing their approval. The days following that gathering were filled with a mix of excitement and reflection. I had invested the trust fund, set up my business plans, and watched as my life began to shift in ways I never thought possible. But while I was feeling empowered and in control, my family was slowly beginning to realize the magnitude of the changes. I could see it in the small things, the way they looked at me differently, how their questions about my life became more probing, and the subtle shifts in their behavior. It was clear they weren't used to me being so independent, so distant, and so sure of myself. I wasn't the person they could call on for financial help anymore, and that fact was sinking in for them. I didn't immediately cut ties with them, but I made it clear that things were no longer the same. I didn't answer calls as quickly, didn't respond to every text, and certainly didn't show up when they wanted me to fix their problems. I had given enough of myself for years, and now it was my turn to take care of myself. They weren't used to me saying no. They had always assumed I'd be there for them, but that assumption was no longer true. I was living my life for me, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into the old dynamic. The first real moment of change came when my mom called me, asking for help with a bill. For the first time, I didn't immediately offer to help. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that right now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What do you mean you can't?" she asked, clearly taken aback. I could hear the disbelief in her voice. She was used to me always saying yes, but now I wasn't that person anymore. "I'm focusing on my future, Mum," I said, "and I need to make sure I'm putting myself first for once." The silence on the line spoke volumes. My mum didn't respond immediately, and when she did, her voice was quieter, almost unsure. "I understand," she said after a long pause. "But we're family, you know. You can't just shut us out." I let her words sit there for a moment, but I didn't feel the need to apologize. I had been shut out for so long, expected to be the one who gave without ever receiving. I had done enough for them. Now I was making the tough choices to prioritize myself, and that wasn't something I was willing to apologize for anymore. In the weeks that followed, I found myself getting used to this new version of myself. It was like I had been living in the shadows for so long, always playing the part of the dutiful family member, the one who always helped, always sacrificed, that I had forgotten who I was without all of that. I was still me, but I felt more like myself than I ever had. I could make decisions without worrying about what they would think. I could take risks, knowing that I had the freedom to do so. It was exhilarating, but the real test came when my family tried to re-enter my life. They sent a few text messages, left some voicemails, but I didn't respond. The ball was now in my court, and I wasn't about to let them come back into my life on their terms. If they wanted me in their lives, they would have to respect the new boundaries I had set. The first real confrontation came when my sister showed up at my door one evening. I wasn't surprised. She had always been the one to push my buttons, the one to try and manipulate me into doing things I didn't want to do, but this time, I didn't let her in. I stood in the doorway and listened as she tried to convince me to help with some financial trouble she was facing. "I know you've got money now," she said, her voice coated with desperation. "You can help me. You know I'd do the same for you." The words stung, but I didn't let it show. I had been there for her, for everyone, for so long, and I wasn't going to fall for it again. "No, I can't," I said firmly. "I've made my own path now, and I'm not going back." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, I thought she might get angry, might try to guilt, trip me into giving in, but instead, she just stared at me, almost as if seeing me for the first time. The moment was awkward, but I didn't feel bad. I had set the boundary, and I wasn't going to let her cross it. She turned to leave, but before she did, she said quietly, "I hope you know what you're doing. Family isn't supposed to shut each other out." I closed the door gently behind her and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My life had changed. I had changed. And though it wasn't easy, I knew it was for the better. I was no longer living for their approval, for their expectations. I was living for myself. And that felt like the most satisfying victory of all. So, if you were in my shoes, would you have made the same choice? Would you have put yourself first after years of giving to your family? Let me know what you think in the comments. And stay tuned for more on how my journey unfolds. The days following that family gathering where I had finally set my boundaries felt strangely peaceful. I was free, and I wasn't just talking about the trust fund or the money. It was more than that. I was free of the expectations and pressures that had been placed on me for as long as I could remember. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval or validation. I was making my own choices, living my life for myself, and it felt liberating. But as I settled into this new version of myself, I began to notice something. My family's reaction, or rather their lack of reaction, was telling. At first, there was the silence, the absence of the usual texts, calls, and invites to family gatherings. It was as if I had been erased from their world, a strange feeling considering how much I'd given them over the years. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that this was exactly what I needed. The distance gave me perspective, allowing me to see my family's true colors, in a way I hadn't before. They didn't call because they missed me. They called because they were used to having me around to fix their problems, to help them when they were in. But when I stopped answering their calls and stopped giving, they didn't know what to do. The tables had turned, and they weren't happy about it. It wasn't just my immediate family that noticed the change. Some of my extended family began reaching out. Curious, cautious, almost as if they were testing the waters to see if I would still be the same person who would help them when things got tough. But I wasn't. I had made it clear that I wasn't a backup plan, that I wasn't a safety net they could fall back on whenever they needed me. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. The first real breakthrough came when I received a call from my grandpa. I hadn't heard from him in a while, and I wasn't sure how he'd react to the changes I had made, but when I picked up the phone, his voice was warm, filled with pride. "I see what you've done," he said. "I'm proud of you. You've finally taken control of your life." For a moment, I was speechless. My grandpa had always been a man of few words, but those words meant more than anything. I hadn't expected him to be so supportive, but hearing him acknowledge my growth felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was like all the doubts I had about my decision disappeared in that one moment. I realized that despite everything, I had made the right choice. I wasn't just about the money or the revenge, it was about the growth, the independence, and the understanding that I could do this on my own. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong, but proving to myself that I could stand up for what I deserved, and that's when everything clicked into place. The family, the struggles, the years of giving without receiving, it all made sense now. I wasn't meant to be the person they turned to when they needed something. I was meant to be someone who created her own path, who didn't rely on others for validation. I wasn't defined by their opinions or expectations. I had taken control of my life. And for the first time, I felt truly empowered. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Sure, my family had their opinions, their expectations, but in the end, I didn't need to meet them. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to how much I could give or how much I could do for them. It was tied to how much I valued myself, how much I was willing to fight for my own happiness and success. Looking back, I don't regret a single choice I made. The trust fund, the business, the distance from my family. It all led me to this moment of peace, of independence. I was no longer the person they could take advantage of. I was the person who had taken control of her destiny. And in the end, that's all that mattered. So, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you take control of your life and put yourself first? Or would you continue to live for others? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the journey, stay tuned for more updates.